done, restaurant. Okay, let's continue next. What else?
All the way. All the way. Push.
Serving my role as a head coach and also doubling up as the ProCyclingSG general manager.
Been with Mitchelton Scott as a performance coach and a sports director, first with the Continental team, which was Mitchelton Bike Exchange.
My name is Jia Yan and I am from Deloitte Southeast Asia Sports Business Group. Like you see yourself hitting a plateau, and then subsequently probably you all won't see that progressive advancing from one level to another.
It takes a lot of experimenting on your own. I mean, don't be afraid to try and don't be afraid to have a fail set. I have done many fail sets on my own, to finally understand, roughly where I stand.
Well, is that it's important to sometimes just go out and ride.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of ProCyclingSG's live stream, where we will be sharing with you the latest best practices and tips on cycling. My name is Jia Yan and I am from Deloitte Singapore Sports Business Group. And if you have watched our first two episodes, you will know the two speakers joining on this live stream today, and they are none other than Adrian and Andrew. So for the benefit of the viewers who didn't watch the first two episodes, allow me to introduce them again. So firstly, we have Adrian Ng, General Manager of ProCyclingSG, who's also the head coach of our national team. And secondly, we have Andrew Smith, Sport Director and Performance Coach of Mitchelton Scott Pro Cycling Team at Greenedge Cycling. Hi Adrian, hi Andrew.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good to have the both of you again today. Oh yeah, it's morning over at your side.
Yeah.
Because currently it's a really rainy afternoon in Singapore today. So it has been raining since like 7 a.m. in the morning. We're just wondering how's the weather over there?
Beautiful day in Italy.
Oh,
sunny. Yeah.
Great. So Andrew, I heard that you have just returned from the Tour of Czech recently, and then like currently with the Tour de France happening, which also began on like the 29th of August, must be an exciting time for your team. So just maybe you want to share with the viewers, how has it been?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I think really busy time as well. I've actually just come back from Tour of Hungary as well on Thursday. So we had some good results in Hungary. We didn't have the great results we had in Tour of Czech, but we had a couple of second places in the stages, and we had a third place overall with Damien Housen in the general classification. Really good race by our team. We had a little bit of bad luck as well. There were a few crashes in the finishes and so on that affected us, but luckily we all got through safely. And then obviously, as you said, Tour of Czech, we did really great job. The guys won the team time trial, and then Damien Housen also won the last stage and the general classification. And yeah, good way to kick off the season for most of them. And we've been waiting so long to get it going. And then obviously the Tour de France is on at the moment, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching that. And we have Adam Yates in the yellow jersey. So that's, super nice to have that, especially after all the waiting and all that everyone's been through. So, yeah. Excellent. Oh yeah,
nice.
you got some photos there. You got old Damo, who won Tour of Czech. At the bottom, you've got also Damo, third in the Tour of Hungary. And then you've got Adam Yates there. Photo of him in the leader's jersey at the Tour de France, which is obviously a huge honor and something that everyone I think dreams of one day. It's just to wear the yellow jersey, not even to win it and to wear it into Paris. Some guys just dream of wearing it, even if it's just for a day. So yeah,
Aww.
Great for us, great for the team.
Yeah, but congrats on the few wins that you guys have. I think it will definitely be you guys will definitely be putting some exciting show for everyone to see. Looking forward to that.
Great. Thanks.
Nice. So just a recap. In the first episode, we shared a lot on basic safety tips. And now that we are seeing competition starting again and more people cycling on the roads due to lockdown measures being eased. So do you see what we have shared back in episode 1 still applicable to what's happening currently?
Yeah, Jiayan, I mean, recently, there are quite a couple of crashes in Singapore. So I guess, much can't be stressed about, wearing your helmets properly. Remember about the one finger spacing, you don't want it to be too high, so that you cover your forehead, and make sure that your helmet chin is just right below your ear loop, and then it's fastened properly. And please do wear gloves as well. I mean, we can't take for granted, if there's any emergency, you want to protect your palm, yeah, and as well as there's some friction as well. Example, today is raining. If you're wearing a glove, with some friction, it does really help to hold the bars, especially if your bar tape is pretty slippery. So these are some of the things, helmet, gloves, to put it on, and and enjoy yourself, and also to go slow, because we have been since phase one, we haven't really started riding outdoors. So now we are given a chance. So maybe gradual build up and improve on your situational awareness. I think that really helps a lot. I think Andrew also had his fair share of noticing some crashes as well, right, in the world tour or where you guys are.
Yeah, we've had a few horrendous crashes, I think, in the World Tour races since coming back. Obviously, there were the two quick step riders. Was first of all Tour of Poland. We had Jakobsen crash, and that was really, really bad. He's one of the riders on the quick step, the Koenig team, and really bad crash. Maybe partially due to safety on the organization's part, which has really highlighted that, and it's become really important, and riders and teams are putting a lot of pressure on the UCI and on race organizations to just try and make it as safe as possible. And then obviously there was also from the same team, Remco Evenepoel had a really bad crash where he fell down a ravine at Tour of Lombardia. Both of them seem to be on the recovery. But again, it just highlights that the basics matters also matter. And if you think about the first stage of the Tour de France, the riders actually neutralize some of the more dangerous sections and neutralize the descents, the peloton as a whole, which just shows you that even the professional riders know their limits, and there's a limit to their skills and their abilities, and the conditions play a super important part in that, the roads and the conditions in terms of weather as well. And I think we need to remember, as when we go on our day-to-day rides, that we need to take that into account, always stay within our limitations, and not push the limits, and stay safe, do what we're comfortable with, and do what we're in control with. What goes for us goes for the professionals as well. So
Yeah, agree with you. So, as we have mentioned, that safety is paramount, and we would like to take this opportunity to say this again. Please do not take your safety for granted. So yeah, in the last episode, we covered more on how you can advance from one level to the next in terms of progressive training, and we understand that many of the viewers would like to know how to plan their training in the longer term, and hence today's episode is actually on structured trainings. And so the question for the both of you, Adrian and Andrew, how can cyclists go about planning their training from progressive to maintenance, recovery and rest? Maybe you can show us an overview of work done in a year.
Yeah. So if we can have it flash on the screen. So this is a typical example of an overview of work done in a year. As you can see, some of you who are using a Training Peaks software, which is a software to analyze cycling data, you'll be familiar with this. The purple line is basically your fitness, or what we call a cumulative acute training load, which is the amount of work you've done each week. Okay, the blue color line is your fitness line, which is a cumulative training load, which over time, you build up your fitness level. And then the yellow bar, you see it below, it's basically your training stress balance, or what we call a form. Okay, so these are just three of the three things that we normally look at when we are planning a year in advance program. So I think planning is really an art. There's no hard and fast rule, or no right or wrong. It is really individual. And there's a lot of flexibility and lots of room for you to experiment, what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So Yeah, so to actually plan your program in advance, you will first need to make sure that you have a fixed date, of which events you are targeting. And once you can confirm that date of the event, you work backwards. And this is where, you build blocks of your fitness leading up to it. So maybe Andrew, you would like to share a bit about this, what we just see on the chart regards to fatigue, fitness, and form.
Yeah, exactly, Adrian. That's you made some good points there, and I think just looking at that graph again, we've spoken about training peaks before, and again, it's come up in our conversations, and I think this is such a good tool to use. There's so much functionality in using training peaks. I think the important thing that we need to keep in mind here is if we think about what we discussed in the previous broadcast, where we spoke about the overload principle and recovery and how to sort of push your body a little bit more so you actually progress. This is clear if you look at this graph. So I take it this was a pretty good coach here. Maybe it was you, Adrian. The standout thing that you can see here is that you've got these peaks and valleys in these graphs, and that just means that you've had little periods where you've progressively stressed the body more by overloading it, and then after that you've had a little bit of recovery, and that's clear from this graph, and that's just something that we can remember when we plan our own training or when we do that kind of thing. That's super important. And as you said, you're going to work back from your objectives. So I think the first step is that you need to identify your objectives, and you work backwards, and you kind of reverse engineer your training program, and you build these peaks and valleys in terms of the volume and intensity that you require into that program. And I think then the next thing to remember is that we can plan these things really far in advance, but in the end it's just a training plan, and it's not, we need to be adaptive, and we've seen that this year even in the professional teams. There's so much changes in the calendar. There's so many adaptations that we need to do in terms of thinking about race dates that have changed or cancelled, and I think that's, especially this year, something that's very applicable to the professional riders, whereas in the past there's been there was kind of a template. If you target the race like the Tour de France, which is on at the moment, there was kind of a template of how you would prepare for that, and that's kind of changed, and different teams have taken on different approaches. Some have had really intense training camps and training periods. Others have done more racing before the tour. Others have done less. So it just shows you there's different ways to do this, and maybe this year more than ever, the pros, in the way that they approach their training, is probably a little bit more similar than the viewers out there would be.
I see. Yeah, but looking at it, I think it's just like this overview of a year. If I would like to see it in like a smaller chunks, is there, how would it actually look like?
Yeah, so if we can have a look on the monthly cycle. So yeah, this is basically a typical period, what we call a base period. So as what Andrew mentioned, if you have an objective, you do a reverse engineer and work backwards. That's where you add in blocks of training leading up to your objective. So we all start with a base period. Base period is a period whereby you get your body started. This is where you want to do a lot of steady state, right? But with some intensity inside it. So during base period, what we don't want to do is to totally leave intensity out. There must be certain form of intensity during this period of time, but the volume is still kept at a relatively high. You spend relatively good amount of hours on this steady state zone that you are cycling in. So as you can see from this typical 4-week cycle, first, second, third, first week is always a okay week, second week is a build up, and third week is always the hardest week, and then the fourth week is always the recovery week. Same goes for the intensity. So your body is very good in adapting, and when it sees a routine and a cycle, it gets adapt very well, and this is where this 4-week cycle kind of work well. So maybe Andrew, you if you would like to share a bit on this period, what you guys do there.
Yeah, exactly, Adrian. I think also there's different ways of doing this, but you've touched on most of it. I think what's important to understand here is that it's the base period, and what that means is you're building the foundations of everything that follows. So it's kind of like building a house, and if your foundations aren't really steady and stern, everything's going to collapse afterwards. So what you're doing in this period is you're basically stimulating and developing the aerobic system of the athletes, and that's really important. I think in terms of what we do in the professional teams, I see some numbers there in terms of hours, and we just need to remember that these numbers and the volume of training that you do in this period really depends on your time at hand, but also your ability. So in the base period, the pro riders will train anything from 20 to 30, 35 hours a week sometimes. And that's just not the capabilities of the average person out there. Don't think that you can train. You see some training programs, or you see some data of some of the pros, and you think that if you train that way, then you'd be able to perform similarly. There's as we've said before, you need to progressively increase your training, and it can take years to get there. What's also really nice to see on this graph that you've got there is that you've got 4 weeks of sort of building up, and then you've got 1 week of recovery. So again, that really touches on the overload principle that we spoke about in the previous broadcast. And then obviously it also depends on where you situate, where within your base period you've got this specific week, because you can also change this around and start off with maybe 12-hour week and go down to 8, and then have a bit of a recovery, and then you can do it in reverse. It really depends on how you've got this in your program with relation to your goals.
Agree. So just now you were saying, Andrew, you were saying that on this part that you also need to ensure that there's this progressive part. So what you and Adrian shared earlier is on the base period. Is there like maybe a training program for like a level higher?
Yeah, so if we can look at the next cycle, the next block. So before. Yeah, so after the base period where Andrew just mentioned, where we spend a bulk of our time at steady state, build our aerobic fitness, this is where we approach the build phase. The build period is where we start to include more intervals and also more high intensity stuff. So build period, as you can see, volume and intensity normally doesn't go well hand in hand. So to avoid injury, you need to be really, really careful. When your volume is high, you want your intensity to be low. Vice versa, when your intensity is high, you need to lower down the volume. If you try to do both at the same time, it's a matter of time before you hit a burnout rate. This is where we want to avoid. So during this build period, you can see that the volume, is way much lower than the one in the base phase, whereas the intensity is kept at a relatively high level. I think in the world tour or in the professional racing scene, I guess guys race day in and day out. Maybe Andrew, you would like to touch on that and how you see it, the similarity of it.
Exactly. I think in the build period is a time when we in the professional teams would already start to introduce some racing. You'd actually, I suppose, do quite a bit of racing in your build period, and use that as part of your intensity. It's just not possible to, especially at this level that we're at, to just basically train and then arrive at your goal event. You just don't have the same stimulation. So racing would definitely be part of it, but you would identify smaller goals on the way to your main goal. So if you have SEA Games or national championships or Asia Games in your part of the world, you'd probably identify that as your main goal, and then you'd have little steps on the way, and that you'd introduce in your build period, and you'd use that racing both as something serious that you need to perform at, but also you'd use it as a training stimulus.
Okay, understood. So just wondering, at least me coming from a canoeing background, I have a taper period of 2 to 3 days, maybe just going out for like a light paddling. Just wondering, for cycling, is it the same for
Yeah, so being a Singaporean, we love to hear the word taper, right? Taper basically means, rest day's coming. Yeah, let's feed ourselves with good food. So, well, just jokes aside, taper period actually for us, we will normally take 2 weeks out to actually taper down. Maybe we can have the chart to show. Yeah. So this is a typical taper period whereby we really lower down the volume, but we still kept the intensity at a relatively high level so that you remain sharp both mentally and physiologically. You don't feel the tired feeling. So one thing that quite a number of people like to do in taper period is to really lower down the intensities. I would suggest to do it the opposite because you still need the mental sharpness, and also you need the body to become sharp, leading up to your important event. So it's not that wise to actually totally rest, and not do anything. I think Andrew has his fair share regards to what the professional do in the taper period. Andrew?
Yeah, I think Adrian, there's a few things to take into account. I think the first thing is that this is really individual. It really depends on the rider, and it's something that you learn about yourself, or if you're a coach, you're going to learn about the riders that you work with over a period of time. Some guys need a bit more of a recovery and a taper period before a big event. Others less. But I think also you need a little bit of volume in this taper period. I think it's quite often evident to me that some riders or some people out there just really shut down on the volume. And I actually know for a fact that the guys in our Tour de France team, I think 3 days before the tour, they did a 5-hour ride. And you need that, especially at this level, to just keep the aerobic system stimulated, keep the blood volume up and all those kinds of things. It's really important, and you don't want to shut down and go into a recovery phase before a race. And then I think also just you need to consider what your goal is and what you're working on, and then structure your taper period according to that. If you're looking at a 1-day race or something like national championships, you might have a shorter taper period because you only have a 1-day race and it's not a stage race. Again, it will also depend on the training block and what you did before that. If you had a really big training block, maybe you'd have a slightly longer taper. And then, of course, if you think about a stage race, if you're going to go into a stage race, especially something like the Tour, you might need to taper for slightly longer. It also depends where your goal is. The Tour is 3 weeks long. Might need to think about being really in peak shape in the last week. So you might still be building up your training, and then a shorter taper is actually ideal, or you wouldn't taper at all, for example.
Yeah.
So it's really individualized and it really depends. I think just another tip that I can give maybe the viewers out there is I often see amateur riders not doing a training session at all the day before a race, and they do a rest day. And that's something I would kind of discourage. Often after a rest day, or you haven't been on the bike for a couple of days, you kind of feel like a little bit sluggish and you've got these dead legs and it takes you a while to get going. So, what you need to do is you need to do a shortish ride. I think also that's individual, depends who you are and what you're training for. But, anything from an hour to maybe 2.5 hours even is a good ride. And you need a little bit of intensity. So I'd say, different durations of time, different intensities, and just something short to keep all the systems in the body stimulated, to keep the nerves firing, keep the muscles going, and you'll feel good on the day of the race.
Yeah. So just to add on a bit on Andrew sharing is that most of our viewers out there, have a job, a day job and kids to take care of. So sometimes it's pretty difficult to really stick close to this whole periodization cycle. So I mean, it's really individual, right? So if your training is like haphazard, it's like going up and down, then you need to ask yourself if it's even worth to include a taper period, or it's just basically train through to the event itself. Because as I say, we got to lay and weigh basically your situation. And if you don't really have time leading up to your event regards to training, then you will want to maybe take the taper period out and maybe extend your base or your build period slightly longer to the event itself, and during the day, you know, to basically still maintain, as what Andrew mentioned, the volume and intensity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think travel also plays an important part. You know, if you think about maybe the viewers out there have jobs and that kind of thing, but your guys in your national team or even our guys in the pro teams, they travel to go to races, and often, you know, it happens. Sometimes you have a delay or you have a problem or something like that, and eventually you arrive the day before the race. You know, if you don't have the time, there's nothing wrong with getting on the indoor trainer and just even if it's 30 minutes, and do a really good session on there, and just open up the legs, and you'll feel good afterwards. So yeah, you know, just keep in mind that there's different approaches to this.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Programs should be customized according to the various individuals' situation. Yeah, in terms of, I think what you shared about like them still working as well as traveling, I think is definitely applicable to our audience watching us now. Yep. So you shared on the overview of like the year, and then subsequently on the months. Can we probably zoom in to look at how they can structure the trainings for a week?
Yep. So this is a typical 10-hour week schedule. So this is the same schedule that we shared on the last stream. It's also color coded according to the intensity that we shared before in our second stream. So yeah, so this is a typical Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, with intervals on Monday and Wednesday, and Tuesday with the recovery ride, and a Thursday rest. And then Saturday, you know, you do a slightly longer interval, and Sunday, you know, with a pretty easy long ride. So this is individual. As I say, this is just an example. For me, I normally like to put the highest intensity one at the beginning of the week. And then as the days goes by, closer to the weekend, you know, I'll just stretch it into a lower intensity and longer ride. So this is how I find that it works for me. So I think viewers out there will have to see, you know, what works for you in terms of your schedule and your situation. But I think, yeah, so basically there's a rest on Thursday. So maybe Andrew, you'd like to elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, Adrian, I think some good points, and I think what you've touched on there by putting your hard sessions at the beginning of the week is that you're really prioritizing the quality of training. So if your priority is to do interval sets and do it at a really good quality, and you know, set the targets and try and complete them, that's a really good philosophy to have. I also think what I've seen with a lot of amateur guys out there is they tend to have, and it's probably due to work circumstances and so on, but they tend to have a set day of the week where they do a rest day. So let's say it will be a Monday, and every week they'll have a Monday rest day, and you know, I think it's good to move that around a bit and play with different ratios. So what you've got here is you've got 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on. So in a 7-day week, you're still training 6 days, but you have a recovery day every 4th day. So you're actually also allowing for a little bit better quality of training. Whereas if you've got 6 days on, 1 day off, you know, by the time you get to the Sunday, or you know, you might be a little bit more fatigued and you don't complete the set as you should. So yeah, play with that and shift it around a bit. And the ratio of rest to recovery is important, as we've said before in speaking about the overload principle. And I think also this really depends on what phase of your training you're in. You know, we spoke about the base phase, and if you're in the base phase, you're probably going to have similar intensity every day, and you're going to do 4 or 5 days. You know, it depends on who you are, but you can really do with a little bit less rest sometimes. And when you've got really high volume, maybe you want to do 2 days on, 1 day off. And then when you're really getting close to your event and you're almost in a competition phase, and your intensity is really super high, you know, there's no reason why you can't do 1 or 2 days of really good quality training and then have a rest day, and again, that prioritizes the quality of training. So I think there's a lot of you can do in terms of working around the timing of your sessions as well within a training week. So yeah.
Looking at this schedule here, I mean, like I've seen it last week, but looking at the color red, I just want to okay, for me as like a sprint kayaker as well as a runner, my intervals sets are usually a longer distance. Not sure about this 5 times 1 minute hard works, but usually how does maybe Adrian yourself, like when you do it, do you like successfully finish all your sets? Because it looks really the color red as well. I think it looks
Yeah.
really scary. Yeah.
So maybe we can look at an example of the field example of an interval work rest ratio. So what is nice, this is actually taken out from Training Peaks. The purple line you see is basically your energy balance. Okay, so as you can see, there's a line that stretches across your FTP. I think we mentioned that on our previous stream. Basically, it stands for functional threshold power. Basically, a power that you can hold for about an hour or slightly longer. So any effort that is below your FTP line is normally steady state. Okay, any effort that is above your FTP line, we call it a severe intensity. So as you can see, this person supposed to do a 7 set of about a 5 minutes duration kind of effort. But because the power is really, really high above the FTP, there was not enough recovery being set on it. And therefore, this person managed to only finish on, I would say, on the 4th set. Before the 5th set, it goes down. As you can see, the purple energy level just dropped right through down. So this is a classic example where this person have a failed set, and most likely is that the power that he or she is supposed to push is way above his FTP, and that there wasn't enough recovery that's being given, and therefore you can't finish the amount. So your body is like a battery. As you discharge, you need to recharge it back. But the question is how much rest we should give. Yeah, that is an art then to plan the work rest ratio. So maybe if we can look at the this little description chart that we have. Yeah, so I think we did share a bit also on the previous stream. So this is a typical example for you guys out there, that you can use and experiment yourself. So sprints anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds. You can have a recovery of 1:5 all the way up to 1:20. The intensity normally at sprints we go max. I remember Andrew make me do a 30 seconds sprint in Egel in Switzerland, and I almost died, with the foot almost stuck to my neck. And till this day, I think it was you, or was it Alejandro?
Yeah, it was probably me. It sounds like something I might make you do, Adrian.
Sounds scary.
Yeah, almost after that, I could not have my subsequent meal, man. All thanks to him, and I lost some weight. Yeah. So sprints normally around 10 to 30 seconds, and then you have your short intervals anywhere between 1 to 2 minutes. You can have a work rest ratio of 1:2 all the way up to 1:10. You're looking at about maybe more than 150% of your FTP, and then so on. There's moderate and there's long. Maybe Andrew would like to share a bit on this, your view on this.
Yeah, I think Irene, that's you got some good points there, and I think also we have this really negative connotation about not completing a set or training to failure, and failure is such a negative word, but sometimes you need to do these sets where you actually fail, because it gives you an indication of what your limitations are, and that's also necessary. So you learn a lot from those sets. I think also, or if you're always training within your own limitations, then it's hard to improve. You'll also get to a plateau sooner or later. So yeah, you got some good points there, and I think that it just comes back down to those little peaks and valleys that we spoke about earlier in terms of overload principle. It's similar here, but on a smaller scale, where you really need to judge your recovery well. So I think the chart that you just had up there is really relevant and really good. but we also need to remember that probably the number of sets that you can do will depend on your ability and your experience as a rider. So even if the ratio stays probably more or less the same for pros and amateur riders, because you obviously your FTP is what determines the intensity of these sessions. The number of sets that you can do before you fail or before actually the quality of your training decreases would really depend on who you are, and that you get to learn by actually completing these sets and doing them and actually failing sometimes. Then you can actually learn about yourself and do them more accurately.
Okay, but I think maybe I'm getting out of context. But the moral of the story I heard just now was, if I need like an effective weight loss program, I need to look for Andrew yourself, since you give such a tough training program for Adrian to throw up everything that he had for lunch or something.
It's just Adrian who was a bit soft on that specific day.
No, don't be deceived by Andrew's Keanu Reeves look. Yeah, he's not at all Keanu Reeves, man. He's a sadist, man. Look at him. Look at his face.
I can foresee that he has really tough training programs, judging by the wins that Mitchelton Scott has.
Just back on what we spoke about. Just in summary, what we just shared with the viewers out there is an overview of a year program, what we have done, and then if you have a key event, you work backwards. That's where you include the block cycle of a base period, a build period, and a taper period. So if you're really running out of time, then you might want to consider not having a taper period and you train through to the event itself. And just a day before, as Andrew mentioned, before your important event, it's good to do something with some volume and some intensity instead of just totally rest, And maybe we can just leave you guys out there with a summary. Remember, we shared about the weekly schedule. There's some color code. So just to recap what we shared about on Stream 2, can we flash the color chart that has an active recovery? The next one, please. Another one. Yeah. Next. Yep. So just to recap, we actually showed this chart on Stream 2. You can actually use this to plan your weekly program. I guess there's basically a rate of perceived exertion where we can use, if you don't have a heart rate monitor or power meter, you can go on your body feel, and we have a sensation there as well. So you can actually use this to help you to have a rough idea how you want to design your program. And as what Andrew mentioned, don't be afraid to fail and be open-minded and just try, and experiment. And we are always there in our Facebook to try to answer all your questions, if they have any questions along. Yeah, back to you, Giant.
I think that Adrian,
sorry.
Adrian, I think this chart and the other one we have, the rest to recovery ratio, just really goes hand in hand if you're thinking about doing interval sets and planning them out for your next week. So that's really handy. It's a really good tool that hopefully the viewers out there can use effectively to their benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is something that probably we can have it on your site to let people see, have it as a reference if they want to, train, plan their training programs. Yeah. So on this, I'm actually looking at the comments. So Adrian, you mentioned earlier, you must have an event and then you reverse engineer, and then having that event to know how you can plan for your trainings. But there's this question in the comments section. So it's from Shang Yan Si. So question is, how do you plan your training when there are no events to plan for? So any of you would like to take this?
Andrew, you want to go?
It's a very relevant, but it's a very difficult question. I think the biggest challenge between this is staying motivated, because we as athletes, we like to work towards something, and we love competition, and if there's nothing around, we need to try and stay motivated, and if there's nothing to work towards, we kind of lose our impetus. So I think working with a coach in this situation would be a good idea if you don't have a coach already, and try to identify some weaknesses that you could possibly work on. That's try and find different challenges. I think definitely looking at your strengths and weaknesses and trying to improve where you're weak, or where you think that you fall short, maybe in winning races or in getting good results. That's one way of doing that. And then the other thing we need to remember is that this is all going to pass eventually. Eventually we'll go back to normal life and normal racing and normal race calendars, and maybe look at just keep going. Just also find your passion for the sport again. I mean, that's something that as I'm not just riding seriously at all. I just do it for fun, but it's something that I was able to find during these times. It's just I went out and rode my bike and just found my favorite roads and just had fun on the bike. And maybe you guys are able to go out now and ride outdoors. And I think you've got some beautiful areas in Singapore, and I think you've even got you've got possibility to do road bike. You have possibility to do a bit of mountain bike in some places. I think play around with different disciplines, do different things, just keep the legs ticking, and motivate yourself by what drew you to the sport in the first place. I got fitter than I have been in maybe almost 10 years during this period, just because I refound my joy of riding, and I wasn't doing intervals or anything. I was just riding up and down the mountains in my area and next to the lake, and just enjoying the beauty of nature and enjoying being outdoors. So, there's the serious part of really identifying the weaknesses and trying to look ahead at the future, but there's also the other part where just enjoy riding.
So just to do a quick add-on for Shang Yan, yes, if there's no event, maybe if you have a power meter or you are really into some serious training, you can give yourself some goals, like you want to improve your FTP in this period of time, since there's no event, and you can just work backwards from there and do a time trial on your indoor trainer and see if you can improve on that. So just small little motivation. If you have a power meter with you, I think that would be a good time to actually set yourself some micro goals as well.
Yeah. I hope that Andrew and Adrian has actually answered your question, Shang Yan. So I think looking at the comments, hi Oliver, hi Emmanuel. So Emmanuel actually has a question that we covered last week, and thanks Shang Yan for actually helping us let Emmanuel know about the definition of FTP. So maybe if you could, if you have some time, you can check out our episode 2 where we share more on FTP. So I actually know that I actually have looking at our Instagram questions where we actually ask from the public if they have any questions for this episode. So maybe you can flash it up. So how does one create structured training? So I think we covered mostly in this episode. And is there anything else you guys would like to add on?
Andrew?
Yeah, it's a very broad question. And I think most aspects. But I think the first thing that you need to do is try to identify your goals. And as we've said, if you don't have any goals, if there's nothing on the calendar, nothing coming up, try and identify strengths and weaknesses that you could improve, or try to just enjoy riding. But also work backwards from what your goal is. And I think work on your own program, whether you're working with a coach or whether you're doing a little program by yourself. Individualize it to your own needs and to the time that you have available and to your ability. I think there's so many even young riders or up and coming riders who go on the media and they go on the internet and they find things and they see what other riders are doing and what the pros are doing, and that's probably one of the worst things that you can do. Everyone's abilities and times and your characteristics as a rider physiologically, it all differs, and try to work within your own capabilities and really try and structure this individually for yourself, whether you're working with a coach or by yourself. I think that's super important. And yeah, have fun.
Yeah.
That's the most important.
Yeah, just to add on to Andrew's comment, yeah, we have just shared to you all the principles. I think it's enough for you to actually experiment it to create a structured program. So with all the principles that we just shared, if you were to review it after this stream and with the charts that we share with you, I think those are just building blocks that you can actually create your own program and experiment from there with all those principles that we have shared. Yeah, be it indoor or outdoor, I think the reason why we do some trainings indoor on the next question is that, in Singapore, you cycle every a few hundred meters, there's a traffic light. So sometimes doing intervals like 10 to 15 minutes is almost impossible unless you go to places like near the cemetery in Lim Chu Kang, or you go to our coastal road where there's about a 6 km stretch. So sometimes we do it indoor so that, we can actually focus on our workout and not being afraid that there's a car coming from behind or there's traffic disruption, we can do it. So whether indoor or outdoor, if we really have a choice, we would love to do it outdoor. If we are staying where Andrew stays, definitely outdoors every day. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's first of all, training near the cemetery sounds quite ominous, doesn't it?
Oh.
I don't know how hard your sessions are out there, Adrian, but yeah, that doesn't sound
Oh my
sound
God.
easy at all. Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to everything, and I think training on the indoor trainer is sometimes, we've got Zwift and all these things that help us, and it makes it less monotonous, and it's been used really well. I think I can say proudly by our team as well during lockdown times. But like I said, there's pros and cons to everything, and in the end, nothing really beats doing a proper outdoor training session. But also, just looking at some of the pros that you have with training on an indoor trainer, it's really a controlled situation. So you can really, if you have a certain power target and a certain amount of time that you need to train at, or you want to train on a certain resistance or a gradient or whatever, you can really control those variables very well on the turbo trainer. So that's one of the pros, I'd say, of that.
Okay, great. So looking at the questions again from the comments. So we have one from Shenting. Hi, Shenting. So the question is, from a professional perspective, what are your takes on spin classes, VR bike classes at commercial gyms?
Oh,
Maybe a heads up, I'm a fan of gym classes spin, as in gym spin classes. So
Hey,
if you ask
Andrew.
me, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm staying in Singapore. I better not answer this question. If there's anything, they can't find you. So you better answer this one.
You might be training in the cemetery again after answering that.
I think so.
Yeah, I have to be honest, I'm not a fan, but that's just a personal preference. I like to go outside if at all possible. I just think also that it's a little bit different doing these spin classes and things. It doesn't simulate the training very well in terms of how it translates into cycling and racing in the real world. But that said, we've said so many times during the last few broadcasts that how we train is very individualized, and it really depends on what time and resources we have available. And if that's what you have and that's what you enjoy doing, and it's what you do to keep fit, absolutely do it. And you can have really good results from that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Andrew, just a quick question. Do you know of any professional riders that goes to a spin class?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Not at all.
Really? Okay. I think it's nice, the atmosphere is nice, it's nice. There's aircon, there's music, and there's lights. It does really trigger your psychological stimulus to want to work out. I think, as what we have shared before, each on its own, there's no good or bad, right or wrong. it really depends on your own goals, objective, and I think it's not right for us to say which one is better as well, because I think all of it, depending on our situation, as long as it works for us, is the best. Yeah.
Yep. So I hope that we have answered your question, Shen Ting. Yep. So now that we are done with addressing the comment, Adrian, would you want to share what will the next episode be about?
Yeah, so next episode we will actually share on recovery strategies and tips that the professional from Andrew's side use, and what we practice over here as a national team, and what we do in the Sports Institute. So I hope that guys out there will tune in, and we will actually show you behind the scenes some of the stuff that we do for recovery practices. Andrew, anything to add on?
Yeah, I think up to now we've really spoken about recovery in the sense of having days of not training or having little periods of actually easing off of training. But we're going to speak about more strategies, like you said, like what you can do in terms of your nutrition, all sorts of things that you can do to actually help recovery and optimize how you recover. And yeah, there's some interesting things.
Nice. Okay. Seems like it's going to be a really insightful episode. So we hope that the viewers are excited to tune in to hear what you both have to share in the upcoming episode. So to the viewers out there, if you have any questions on what Adrian and Andrew has mentioned earlier on recovery strategies, do leave them in the comments and we will take it up in the next episode. All right, to wrap it up, with all these tips and tricks shared by Adrian and Andrew, we hope that it has given you some insights on how to better plan your training going forward. Hope that everyone enjoyed this live stream with us. And before you go, make sure to like and follow ProCyclingSG on social media at the following handles you see below. And also share this video with your family and friends, regardless of whether they are beginner or seasoned cyclists. Thanks again for joining us today. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.